wherever you are, and welcome to today's webinar, Building Branded mCommerce Apps for SharePoint. My name is Glenn Johnson. I'm a Senior Vice President here at Magic Software Enterprises Americas, and I'm joined today by Andy Bowie, a Senior Consultant here at Magic Software. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Glenn.
And welcome to all of you. We're so glad that you joined us and hope that you will be feeling free to ask questions at any time. We have a question box or a chat box. You can send the questions in the chat box to the host and presenter, and we will be happy to answer those questions when we conclude the formal presentation. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and feel free to type those questions in at any time into that question and chat box, and we'll get to those when we've concluded the formal part of the presentation. Just to begin, let's introduce our concept today for the webinar. We're really talking about building branded mCommerce apps for SharePoint, which means that we're talking about mobile apps that are used for the transaction of the sale of goods and services, mCommerce, apps that are branded for a particular brand as opposed to maybe just a generic shopping site or something like that, typically, and those that have integration and connectivity on the back end to SharePoint. So SharePoint, as those of you know, of course, is a great portal site, content management, portal site builder, content management system, and has the ability to even create functional apps that run in the SharePoint environment, controls workflow, and orchestrates that workflow between knowledge workers using the SharePoint system. And so as a result, it's an extremely flexible system. It's also a system which is available across a large numbers of employees and users within a lot of organizations as well because of its liberal licensing scheme by Microsoft. And as a result, we find it very interesting the kinds of creative solutions that people are looking to create utilizing SharePoint on the back end and mobile apps as a client interaction device from a standpoint of a shopping experience of some kind. And we'll talk about various directions that can go in, and then of course we'll be looking at live demonstrations of building mobile apps, of integrating those mobile apps with your SharePoint environment. So mobile commerce, of course, is just taking off along with the huge shift over the last decade or so to online commerce and e-commerce in general. But mobile commerce is even growing at a faster pace. It was the second quarter of 2013, for example, it was estimated that about $4.7 billion in mobile commerce transactions took place. About 10% and even higher now of e-commerce dollars are being spent via smartphones and tablets, and the pace of growth is very impressive for this market segment. So obviously that's why we want to talk about that, so that your brand can either better leverage its piece of that action or begin to take advantage of that more effectively than you have in the past. We're not going to be talking about advertising design principles per se. There's a lot of mobile ad agencies out there that do a great job, and we certainly be happy to refer you to those for promoting your mobile app or promoting your e-commerce sites and so on to try to get attention. That's really not what we're talking about here. But what we will be talking about is how you actually build those apps, how you integrate those apps that make it possible to transact, and to transact in a branded way, in a way that provides an immersive and interesting user experience reflective of your core brand values. So we can look at a lot of examples of things that people have done. One of the approaches to building apps is to create informative apps, apps that resonate with the brand by providing information that's relevant to the the value of the brand and the interest and promise of that brand. So REI, for example, had apps like the Snow and Ski report that provide useful information to their kind of customer. You have virtual apps, the Zippo app that you see people bringing out at concerts, and now like you can actually buy branded Zippo lighters to display at a concert. It's kind of comical almost, but you gotta love it. And then there's useful, the trend towards building useful apps that where the brand is, in this case, is actually difficult to see. Oh, sorry, I guess we can't see the screen here. Thank you. Apps for SharePoint. My name is Glenn Johnson, a Senior Vice President here with Magic Software, and I'm joined today by Andy Bowie. As we get into today's webinar, we will be discussing this huge field of growth in commerce, which is part of the overall e-commerce market. Something like 10% or higher of online commerce or e-commerce dollars today are actually spent via smartphones and tablets. That represented something like $4.7 billion in the second quarter of 2013. So that area is growing. It's growing at a faster pace than overall e-commerce, and we're here to talk about how you can build those branded apps. We're not here to talk about advertising of mobile apps, advertising on mobile devices, but rather building an app that actually has e-commerce functionality, can transact business, and in order to do that, of course, it's going to need to interact with things in the back end, including quite possibly your SharePoint environment, which is a powerful engine for creating portal sites, for managing content, for orchestrating workflow between users and all of those things. So we wanted to mention this first example of an informative app, this one by REI, which reflects the value of the brand, the intent of the brand in terms of providing people with that outdoors experience, but it's giving them information about conditions and so forth in particular resorts. There's also the fun virtual app from Zippo, where you can go to a concert and wave back and forth with the show of appreciation during the concert, and you can purchase these in the app stores. The Kraft iFood Assistant is a branded app, but it's branded in a different way. You'll notice that I've had to put the logo up above the image of the app here itself because it doesn't appear all over the app. But what they do is that they're subtly making suggestions about various recipes and meals that you can use that include quite often, of course, their Kraft branded or branded foods from some of the Kraft companies that are part of subsidiaries and so forth. And so this is another way. But the real point here is that there are some apps that actually have this useful kind of functionality, and that's what kind of leads and provides the attractiveness. It's not just information, for example. Another example of really truly functional apps are those that interact with the world, the Internet of Things, if you will. And so a good example of that would be DirecTV and the ability to control your DVR to view videos and things of that nature on there. So location-based would be another example. The North Face, which of course is a brand which is also trying to target people who are in the outdoors. Has this sort of trailblazing kind of app that allows you to find routes and so forth for hiking and so on. So this is a great example of an app where it's all about location, and that's really key to the functionality of the app. Then there are gamified ads that incorporate some capabilities for e-commerce as well. Gamification is something we'll spend a little bit of time talking about here today. These are good examples, this one being from Barclaycard. Gamification, it involves sort of the mechanics of gamification, the whole idea that you have the notion of agency, which are the rules that limit how the game works, and then there's the sense of urgency, this pressure to win, to score points, earn badges, achieve new levels, whatever it might be, and all that kind of loops around so that you have this interaction that creates a great sense of the dynamic of that game. And so these are elements of gamification that you need to look at in terms of the mechanics, but you also want to provide engagement which gets beyond just the mechanics and gets to sort of the mystique of the game in many respects. Gartner actually talks about gamification, and they say gamification has emerged as a significant trend in recent years. Gamification uses game mechanics and game design techniques in non-gaming contexts. It's a powerful tool to engage employees, customers, and the public to change behaviors, develop skills, and drive innovation. So when we talk about gamification, we're not leaping into some different world of talking about games or gaming per se, but talking about it in a different context, in the context of business, in the context of the brand, and maybe one dimension of that, but also possibly in the context of e-commerce, where there's actual transactions taking place, not just buying new power packs and things like that for the game, but actually coming to points where you might, for example, earn coupons, earn discounts, earn ways of buying products, and then be able to engage in that transaction right there from the mobile app on the tablet or smartphone. So these are all elements of gamification, and when we look at driving that engagement, that's a key word there that Gartner used. You can do that through sort of the accelerated feedback cycles where it becomes more intense as you move higher and higher through the game, where the goals are clear. It needs to be kind of obvious. The rules need to be understandable, make sense, and more importantly, perhaps, is the story of gamification. There needs to be a compelling narrative, of why we're doing this. If it's completely random, unless that's the actual narrative, is the compelling nature of it is the randomness, then that might be something that you need to work on. And of course, it needs to have a level of challenge. It can't be too easy. On the other hand, it needs to be achievable. You don't want to just send all the beginners away because they're frustrated and can't figure out or don't have the skills to be successful at some early levels and stages of the game. So it needs to be fun for everybody, have some growth, and be compelling in that sense. As we look at various brands and categories of mCommerce, one of the interesting ones, I think, are luxury brands in general and jewelry in particular. And a study was done looking at various jewelry brand apps that were out there in 2013, just last year, and looking at the interactive features or functionalities that were supported by those various brands. And the most common was the support of touch and swipe. There are also fairly commonly available swipeable product galleries, where you can, drag your finger across and just kind of flip through and see what's available in a particular category and that type of thing. Quite often there were optimized drop-down menus being used. Surprisingly, the optimization for both landscape and portrait mode is lagging. Only 16% of these apps are supporting this, so that's an area probably for improvement. That's an area where you might be able to stand out, have a little bit better app than some of the competitors perhaps, and also the ability to adapt the gallery to orientation change. A fluid grid was typically very rare to find, and there maybe the value is not as great. I mean, it might not be that many people really feel the need to change the orientation of their screen while they're browsing, but sometimes people start in that portrait mode, and then they realize that they really want to be in landscape mode in order to flip through. So you never know what could be important in terms of providing a more compelling environment for your mCommerce app. And we're talking about mCommerce apps in general, not just gamified apps, but more importantly, probably just shopping apps that are branded for your particular brand. So there are a lot of great examples out there. I think in the jewelry sector, I love the Tiffany app for couples that are getting engaged, and they can actually do the ring sizing and selection in the app, take a picture of the hand, get the ring size that's required from that, browse through products that are available, see pricing, $41,000, 2.5 carat ring there, that kind of thing. And then there's the social element, the engagement that allows you to notify your circle of friends, tell them you're engaged, show them the ring, all of those kinds of exciting things, from a mobile app. You haven't even gotten down to the store yet and actually picked it up, perhaps. So that's kind of fun, and I think a good example of an app that takes advantage of the camera, takes advantage of the social dimension of the online and mobile experience, and also that is beautifully branded for the particular luxury brand here, in this case, Tiffany & Company. So there's a lot of interesting things that are possible there, but that need to be supported by the technology underneath that makes it possible to interact with, perhaps a large product catalog in SharePoint, perhaps a large pricing database that's maintained by various workers across your organization that are utilizing SharePoint as the central repository for that. Another interesting example is Cleveland Golf, where they had an in-store app that's actually their sales team brings into the store on a tablet, in this case an iPad, and they're presenting the ability to the store manager to browse through products, to make selections for their order, and to place those orders. So they're kind of looking over the shoulder, the store manager sort of looking over the shoulder of the brand representative, and again, with a very beautiful kind of interactive interface that shows products, that shows the store manager exactly what they're getting, but also gives them that very detailed ability to do selections all the way to the point of ERP integration, so that it knows what's available in inventory. If the product catalog changed that morning, if new prices were announced, all of that is synced to the mobile app, so that they're experiencing the very latest in terms of what needs to be offered to the customer at any time out in the field. So I thought that was another interesting solution. So we wanted to share with you how you can work with SharePoint, and Magic's Enterprise Mobility offering gives you a pathway to use SharePoint as a platform to support your branded mCommerce mobile apps. And the Enterprise Mobility offering from Magic incorporates the integration, has excellent tools for user experience. It's based on in-memory computing techniques, so the speed and performance and availability is there. Security measures are supported, encryption and decryption of the transport and communication between the device and anything that's stored on the mobile device, as well as the server side. There are management tools for mobile device management available from Magic as well, and then of course services, the expertise to support the development and integration of these kind of apps for your organization. So what that breaks out to in terms of product offering from Magic is really 3 pieces plus services. So the XPA application platform that you'll be seeing in a moment is the application platform, the ability to build both the server side of your mobile app and the client side of the mobile app across multiple operating systems. The integration platform then ties together with the application platform and the clients of the application platform in terms of providing to them the information from your various back-end systems across the enterprise, ERP systems, CRM systems, content management systems like SharePoint, email platforms and servers, and a whole host of logistics and e-commerce apps like Magento or WebSphere Commerce or whatever you have in your organization. So it spans the spectrum of abilities to integrate to the various APIs of these systems that are out there to provide you with a more seamless way of working and allowing you to create these integrations and applications without having to go into programming projects of line-by-line coding. Now, the mobile device management solution is also available to give you the ability to control what happens to your mobile devices, really more on the internal organization, obviously, for your team. And then we also offer professional services across all of these areas. So with the integration capabilities, you're really working from these multiple client-side devices. You're leveraging metadata that allows you to interact seamlessly with the APIs of a wide variety of business applications, both those for which we have pre-built adapters such as SharePoint, but also with a wide variety of APIs that are based on open standards such as web services or messaging queues or flat XML files, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all kinds of different ways that integration can take place through literally dozens of components and services and methods and so forth. So on the creation of the applications, people have asked, well, how can you create the apps and then get them to have that native look and feel? And so the way that it does that is basically by deploying based on the style of these environments, and you can tweak that even further. But so you write your application once, and then something like a delete page warning, whatever that is, can come up on the screen based on the style of that operating system, whether it's a different version of iOS or different versions of Android on different devices. They have different style sheets and expectations in those environments, Windows and so on. So you're always getting a look and feel that is conducive to a normal user experience, and this increases engagement. And of course, as you brand the app, as you gamify the app, and other things that go beyond just the normal interaction styles of those particular devices, you have a lot of freedom there as well to do what you want to do in the creation of these apps. So the Magic Mobile offering is really a full package because you have that multi-platform support, you have the back-end integration, you have native clients with native look and feels adapted to any form factors and sizes, and also the ability to have both native and hybrid HTML5 deployments, all based on an environment with superb integration of your applications. So how do you work with SharePoint specifically, working with those enterprise APIs? APIs, for the mobile side are going to fall into a variety of different categories. You have your mobile client-side APIs, server-side APIs. A good example of a client-side API would be something like a barcode scanning API. So it's a pre-built capability to do barcode scanning, and it's going to return a specific result to your application. So you don't have to write the code that does barcode scanning on the client. So that's a good example of a client-side API. A server-side API might be something such as SMS communication API for the server side of your app, so that you can instead of writing all of this lower-level code to create an SMS platform, you simply utilize that API, and it provides you with those capabilities of communicating via SMS, for example. And that might be within a specific server-side application. And then there are those services that are more accessible to any application in your enterprise. And so we consider these to be enterprise application APIs or services. And that a good example of that might be something like GPS or geolocation service, where you send the geolocation data and you get back a particular result. Maybe it's an address or whatever, particular map URL, something like that. So SharePoint has an API. Of course, it has more than it has a set of different integration capabilities built into it. It's not just one thing. Certainly, business connectivity services is one that's talked about a lot, but there's also very powerful SOAP-based web services for integration available through SharePoint. And of course, depending upon your version of SharePoint, different aspects of these capabilities are available. Now, so the Magic XPI integration platform works with any of the server editions of SharePoint in terms of integration. So because we can utilize the web services as well as leveraging BCS. And so while BCS has a lot of services, there's a lot of programming involved in that. So if you haven't already gone down the BCS path, you probably don't need to. You probably are better off just leveraging the web services because they're, frankly, a lot more extensive and easier to work with. But the methods that are available with SharePoint, like I said, that are really advantageous is probably those SOAP-based web services that are there. So overall, what you're looking for in that integration platform then is the ability to deal with SOAP, the ability to transform, format, and transport XML. You want to be able to run things like web services wizards. You want to be able to monitor directories, parse XML files, perform basic CRUD operations on those XML files. You should be able to integrate major ERP and CRM applications from vendors like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, or whatever your system is really is the important one. Be able to model the business process so that you can talk about it and describe it internally within your IT organization and to the business users and C-level executives that want to know, what it is that you're designing. So you want a business process modeling capability as well as a visual business process orchestrator so that you can create those real-time asynchronous and scheduled business activities that are taking place in the background behind SharePoint, behind your mobile apps in order to perform the integration. You want to have monitoring of all of that so that you can see what's going on. How many times did this process execute? What was the average latency or execution time for that particular process, and so on. You have to have security built into the system. So you might even, probably deploy it behind your firewall. You're going to want, things like user rights and authentication capabilities and encryption and decryption, all of the kinds of security capabilities that make for a secure environment. And you're going to want to pay attention to scalability, particularly with mCommerce, where the parallel processes can be executing rather robustly. You want to have in-memory computing, if at all possible, and you're also going to want to look at compliance with principles of service-oriented architecture so that you really control your development costs and you're able to virtualize across the wider environments, including external services. And then to be able to support, obviously, those multiple platforms is very important. So I think an integration platform should have these kinds of capabilities in support of what it is that you're trying to accomplish with the building of your mCommerce app. So Magic XPI is an integration platform that does that, just like we suggested with the support for SharePoint and the other applications in your environment and all of the various technologies that we've mentioned and many more that we haven't mentioned and that aren't listed here that could at some time become important or key to integrating with that, one oddball application or maybe even custom homegrown piece of software that you've created in your environment. So being able to interact with its database or with the flat file that you've created or whatever can become very important. And doing so with in-memory computing techniques just makes for an an enterprise-grade reliability and an elasticity that is quite important. And we do that across an architecture that allows you to leverage adapters at a higher level, and then underneath that know that there's a server environment that's running that's doing all the orchestration and transformation, and that's doing so in a highly scalable fashion. So what I'd like to do at this point is, rather than talk about those capabilities, is show them to you. So I'm going to ask Andy to share his desktop and kind of take over the presentation at this point, and then we'll come back after Andy's demonstrations and we'll take your questions. So Andy, take it away.
All right, thank you, Glenn. In the demonstration today, there's two main things we're going to go over. And the first time we're going to go through is going through our Magic XPA Studio. And what we're going to do with the Studio is we're going to develop an application from scratch and then deploy it to an Android device. Right now on the screen, all you see is an Android emulator. We're going to go ahead and switch over to my development environment, and we'll see the XPA Studio. Now, with the XPA Studio, I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to name this project My First App. Okay. And we're prompted with a blank project. Now, on the left, we can see we have our models repository, our data repository, and our programs repository. And for some of you, this may not mean anything right now, but basically, this is how XPA kind of organizes the resources that an application will use. Now, while we're talking about resources, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my XPA root installation directory, and I'm going to go ahead and copy some models. Basically, what models is, as you can kind of guess, models that a variable, a GUI object, or even a program may take over, and something that we would reuse throughout the project. So I'm going to go ahead and take these models, and what's included with these models actually are form sizes. Basically what I've done is I went ahead and prepped and I've created our emulator's dimensions or screen size. In this case, we're using a Nexus 7 tablet. And I'm going to go ahead and copy these models into my project. So my first app, and copy. Now instead of having to go into my form editor, which I'll show you in a few minutes, and having to readjust this form to fit perfectly the device's screen size, I can just go ahead and import it. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my import wizard, file import, and I'm going to go ahead and import my models and my properties. Okay, and when I kick out of here, we'll go ahead and see that 37 models were created. Now, the application we're going to be creating today is just a simple Hello World application. It's simply just going to have one screen and one button on it. The button is just going to raise a pop-up, so I can kind of show you how, as Glenn mentioned, our XPA applications take the native look and feel of whatever operating system they're being executed on. Okay, so we have our models. Let's go ahead and go into our programs. I'm going to go ahead and create a new program by pressing F4, and we'll call this program Welcome. Give it a public name, since we're going to be calling it externally from our application, and I'll go ahead and zoom. Now, when we first go into the app, brand new program, it's going to prompt us with the program properties. Because this is an online rich internet application, it's going to be a rich client application. There will be a user interface, so it's interactive. Now, on this screen, we can see three tabs. We see the data view, the logic, and the forms tab. The words may be kind of may make their purpose a little bit obvious, but basically the data view allows us to access a certain data source that we've defined, whether it be a database, or whether it be a MS SQL database, B-tree, pervasive, etc. This is basically where we would tell the program to access these tables. Since this is just a simple application, we're not going to be accessing any databases today. So I'll just create a virtual variable, placeholder, and give it a picture. On the logic tab, this is where we'll define all the events that will be triggered in our forms. We'll go into this last. The next screen I'd like to take you is to our form editor. Now, when I go into my form editor, here is our welcome program. Currently, I'm about to show you is the form that's assigned to this program. If I zoom into it, we have a defaulted blank canvas per se. This screen size is not that of the Nexus 7, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and kick out of this, and I'm going to actually assign the model, the form first design, to this form. Now when I go into the form, we can see that my screen has been adjusted to the size of the Nexus 7. Actually, I believe this is actually our S3 dimensions. Let me go ahead and change this. Give me 171.5 and 40.550. Now I'm doing this from memory because normally we develop applications on Nexus 7, so I did a lot of testing to see the exact dimensions. But now you can see we have a background image that was imported from our models as well as the screen size. Okay, so let's go ahead and design our screen. I'm going to go ahead and click on the text control and go ahead and click. And I'm going to go ahead and add in my welcome banner. So we'll say welcome, exclamation point. We'll go ahead and make the text fit in the box using our command list here. I can make sure that the text within the control is fitting inside the object's dimensions. And I can also go ahead and use this button to center the object dependent on the control. Okay, so we have our welcome banner. Let's go ahead and change the font size while we're here as well. Make it a little bit larger. Let's give it a font size 14. I'll go ahead and readjust the object size again and go ahead and recenter. All right, and the last object I want to create is a button. So for this button, we'll go ahead and say click me. We'll go ahead and adjust the button size so that it fits, and we'll center it. Now currently what we can see on the screen is we have a home screen that has a welcome label and a button. Now as far as the application is concerned, right now all this button object does is when it's clicked, it shows an animation. No event is risen yet or struck. So let's go ahead and assign and create a user-defined event. We can name it something unique. I'll go ahead and just call this welcome button. No trigger type. And now what we've done is we've assigned what event to raise when this button is selected. Not necessarily any logic, but what event is struck when this button is selected. So now, where do I go to assign what happens when that welcome button event is arose? That would happen in the logic tab. So going into my logic tab, I'm going to go ahead and define my event welcome button and go ahead and program what logic to execute when this event is rose. So I'm going to go ahead and do a verify pop-up message, and it's just simply going to say hello world, exclamation point. Okay. So next, last thing I'm going to do is the application's ready. I'm going to go ahead and go through my syntax checker, check syntax F8, and program is okay. Now before we deploy, one thing I want to point out is right now on the screen we can see that this is a Windows button. As I mentioned before, we're going to Magic XPA applications take on the look and feel of their native operating system. So I want you guys to go ahead and pay attention to what this button, how this button changes according to what operating system we're on. Since we're programming on Windows, it looks like a Windows button right now. But when we deploy it onto our Android emulator, we're going to see that it's turned into an Android button. Okay. So the last thing I need to do is go ahead and compile our application, or second to last thing I need to do is compile our application and create our cabinet file. And now that it's created, we're ready to deploy. Going to our options rich client deployment wizard. This is basically the wizard that allows us to create the application installation package files for all of our supported operating systems. We support Windows Desktop, Windows Mobile, iOS, and Android. And in this wizard is where I determine what operating systems I want to deploy. We're going to create a new entity, and on this application's information menu that we get first, this is where we program, or this is where we set the application's details on a kind of a documentation or cosmetic level. So here under application title, this is the name of the app on the actual device. Application description, if I go into more options on the device about the application, this is where I can see all this information, the publisher, copyright, and version, etc. On the next screen, this is where I input my web server's location. Now, what we're basically doing here is we're creating a client application, and when it comes to online applications, online rich client applications, all the application profile basically stores inside of it is the applications, where the application server is hosted, which is configured on this screen, what the application on the application server name is, so the application server knows what application to return to the device itself. So basically, the application is simply a client, and the application server is what's handling all the metadata and the transferring and the communication from the server to the client. I'll go ahead and go into a little bit more detail about this when we get down. I'm going to go ahead and put in the fully qualified name for our server, magic.-inc. Okay, and I'll go ahead and move on to next. Now, as I mentioned on that previous menu, here we have the application server's name. Now, once the client is commuting with the application server, the client needs to instruct the application server what application to execute, because our application server can be hosting multiple projects. Now, here we have application name again, but this is where we've configured the server. We've configured the server to point to this My First App and where that build file is located. So here I'm going to go ahead and click my Start program, which is the program that's executed when the application is first executed. Since we only have one program, we're raising that one, obviously. All right, going to next. Here's our menu where we can deploy to whichever operating systems we want to. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to be deploying to Android today. Selecting Android. Now, the way we achieve the native look and feel of the operating systems that these applications are being executed on is that we're actually compiling these application installers with their native SDKs. So when we're creating the .apk files for Android, which is the application installation extension for those files, we're actually using Android native SDK. Same thing goes for iOS. We're generating iOS's application installers, which are .ipa files, using Xcode itself. And on this menu, for Android at least, this is where we're pointing to where our Android SDK is located. So now if I go ahead and navigate to my program files, Android SDK, and SDK, I'm basically instructing the wizard to use this SDK to create this APK file. On the next button down, I can configure which Android version to deploy to. Here I'm going to choose Android 18, which I believe is Android OS 4.3. And for the build settings and signings, we can leave these as default. These are all files that come with the standard installation, and we can go ahead and leave it how it is. So I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. And now what it's doing is it's accessing a batch file in the application root, the XPA root installation directory, to generate this .apk file. And what it's going to do is when the generation of the APK file is finished, we'll be able to find it here in the published applications. So here we can see My First App, and it's actually populating all the source code right now. So if I go into my execution properties, I can see all the information I entered. So here we have dev2.magic-inc.com. It's going ahead and entering in basically the configuration that I entered into the wizard. The wizard's basically just a high-level, kind of more user-friendly interface to creating these APK files. Okay, and then furthermore, what we've also went ahead and done is we've configured IIS on this server to go ahead and allow directory browsing on this folder, so we have an easy way to transfer the APK files to our device, as opposed to having to plug our device in and transfer the APK to the device that way, or emailing it to ourselves. This kind of just gives us a little bit easier of a transition to deploy our applications. So the deployment is going to take a little bit of time. While we're waiting for this to wrap up, the second item that I'm going to show in this demonstration is what we call a pharma app application that we've developed that handles integration using our XPI, which is our integration platform, to integrate to SharePoint. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our application, our pharma application, and we're going to create a new contact, and that contact will go ahead and call an HTTP service that we've created using XPI. And it'll once the HTTP service is called, it'll go ahead and create that contact within our SharePoint server. Okay, so we can see that the APK has been generated. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my Android emulator now. But before I switch, I need to start my application server. So here we have my first app. I'm going to boot it up. Give it a few minutes, and let's make sure that it's started. All right, we have Magic Demo. Perfect. Now, let's go ahead. Oh, sorry, not Magic Demo, my first app. Let me double check that that's up and running. My first app is up. Perfect. Let's go ahead and go to our internet browser and go ahead and go to our directory. Now, I have the directory still open, so let's navigate to my first app. This always takes me a couple of tries because the mouse isn't consistent with the quote-unquote touch screen. There we go, Android, and download my first app.apk. Okay, so it's finished. I'm going to go ahead and install. Should be a rather quick install. Go ahead and open. And once that's completed, we should see our screen. So we have our welcome screen and our click me button. And as I mentioned, the click me button no longer has the look of a Windows button, but rather an Android button. So when I select this button, it should go ahead and raise the event, and we get our hello world. Now it says warning because we left the verify warning as its default properties, but we can change that message to say something else. Okay. And just like that, I think it took about 15 minutes. We went ahead and designed an application from scratch and deployed it to our Android device. So let's move on to the second part of the demonstration, which is the Pharma app. Now, before I show you the demonstration, I want to go ahead and open up the source code of our Magic Demo app. And the main program that we're looking at is our Add Contact program. So here we have our form, and we're going to see this in a second, actually our Nexus 7 form, and we have a list of fields. And once we click Save, we can see the event that's rose is we actually have a, we're calling an HTTP post to our XPI server. And this HTTP post basically triggers our XPI project to create the SharePoint contact. Now, for now, in terms of the actual code and the behind the scenes, I'm going to leave it here and move into the demonstration. And after that, we'll take a look at the XPI project and see exactly what's going on when that HTTP post or that HTTP service is called. So switching back to my emulator, I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my contacts. And I'm going to select to add a new contact. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and enter in some sample data. I'll do Jonathan Smith. And it'll just take me a few seconds to finish this out. I'll put in our office's address here in Laguna Hills. Carlotta. Now, when I click the Save button, we're going to see a couple what looks like error message, but actually they're just just checkers or data checkers to make sure that our fields are pulling in correctly, and it's basically just some test verifiers that we leave up, so we can see that data is coming in okay. And we'll just say notes. Okay, so now actually with this mobile application, we're able to integrate to all these other systems. We've configured our XPI project to go ahead and take in a parameter of what app or basically what CRM or ERP we're going to integrate with. So today we're doing SharePoint. I'll go and click SharePoint, and I'll go and press Save. So here we see our first warning. This is just to make sure that our data is pulling in okay. And after clicking OK, it's going to go ahead and call our XPI project and return to us in a contact or a SharePoint contact number. So we'll just give this a few seconds to execute. So we created a new SharePoint entry number 54. Now let's go ahead and switch over to SharePoint. Here's our server. Right now there's no list, so I'm going to go ahead and refresh it. We have our Magic Contacts list right now, and we can see our Smith Jonathan account. Business phone pulled in okay. We have our address, business phone, etc. And it was created at 11:50 a.m. PST, which is right now. So that's our mobile application that integrates with SharePoint. Let's go ahead and take it the XPI project, which is basically the meat of how this integration is possible. So as I mentioned before, in the studio we had our XPA project sending an HTTP post and posting to this HTTP service. This is our XPI studio. As you can see, the interface for development is a lot different than the XPA platform. XPA, we kind of the main methodology is what you see is what you get. There's little, and in both platforms there's very little coding. It's a lot of just kind of a drag, drop, and configure. Same thing goes for XPI over here, but it's more on the drag, drop, and configure interface. Flows process from top to bottom and left to right, and in the blue text we can see conditions. Briefly, we can see f.app. This is actually one of the parameters of our HTTP service, which designates which application to host to post to, whether it's JDE, Salesforce, Sugar, Dynamics CRM, or SharePoint. So now what happens is this project is started on this flow, create account. And in this green area is our trigger section. And basically, what this tells our project is none of this logic executes until the trigger, by definition, is triggered. So we've created an HTTP service and also enabled a RESTful API to allow us to pass parameters to our XPI project. So let me go ahead and move to our service repository and take a look at our HTTP service. We have RESTful. We have our endpoints. Basically, in this service repository, we can define what parameters will be expected in our RESTful UI, or sorry, URL. Now, once the parameters come in, we say on HTTP, we call our HTTP service, which was called REST, and now what we're doing is taking these parameters on the left and assigning them to our variables. And from there, this is how we go ahead and navigate our data mapping. So in our instance, we set the parameter of f.app equals 7, and we went to SharePoint. And here we have our SharePoint component. Now going under configuration, we can see that we're actually pulling in a list and a certain entity, which is our magic contact. Switching back to our SharePoint server, we can see, oh, I just moved, but the name of our list is actually magic contacts. Now if I go ahead and browse these, it's actually contacting our SharePoint server and pulling in all the lists that are on that server. This is happening in real time, and this is how we designate which list to point to. So here we have magic contacts. Pressing OK, we'll see our data mapper. And on our right, we pull in from the server all the possible fields that are associated with contacts. Our destination is SharePoint, and on our left we have all of our variables. And here we're just mapping directly to their corresponding fields. Now, one thing that we like to keep in mind when it comes to XPI projects and the XPI and even XPA platform altogether is maintainability, extensibility, and reusability. What I mean by maintainability is what happens if any of these credentials are changed. Now, if we take a look into the configuration again, here we can see a list of credentials. Now, instead of having to go through every single reference to our SharePoint resource, we can see that we have a resource name here. We have our cloud and our 2007 server. If I go into our resources repository, I can see all the resources that we're using. And instead of going into every single component, I can go ahead and just change the credentials here. And this would go ahead and be inherited throughout the entire project of these resources changes. Now I said maintainability and now reusability. Now what happens if I want to develop a project that's similar to this one using the exact same resources? Instead of having to go create a new project and having to go through and re-add every single one of these resources, I can actually save all these resources and export them as a .xml file. Furthermore, when I go into my project, I can choose to append or overwrite resources, simply point to that resources.xml file, and here we can see all the resources that I want to import. Same thing goes along for flows. If I'm going to be using this integrate to eWorld flow in a separate project, instead of having to reconfigure every single step and all the data mappers and all the data formatting, I can actually export this flow, right-click, export, and import it into my project. That's basically how XPI handles reusability, maintainability, and extensibility. That's basically all I have for the demonstration today. So Glenn, if you'd like to open up the floor to questions, I'd be happy to take some.
Absolutely, Andy. Thank you very much for your demonstration, and we invite you now to type in any questions you might have into the question or chat box, and we'll be happy to respond to those. So we'll just give you a moment to enter those questions in, and it can be related to what you saw in the demonstration or the presentation or both, and we'll be happy to respond. First one, what databases are supported, Andy?
Databases that are supported is we have Pervasive SQL ISAM, we have MS SQL, SQLite, and also we can connect to ODBC, so we can always use that as a connector to any other database connections that you have.
Okay. Next, is the integration server in your cloud or ours?
I'm sorry, the integration server, if I could have a little bit more clarity.
I guess it's asking where it's deployed. Is it deployed? It's not SAP.
I see. So on the XPI end, we actually deployed to, in 3.4, which was the iBolt times, we deployed to a broker. But now with XPI, we're deploying to a Gigaspace, which is basically kind of a local cloud. This local cloud installation comes with the XPI suite and is installed with the XPI installation.
Okay. And can you also mash up the SharePoint interface in an HTML web part that appears in the mobile app?
That's actually a very good question. I haven't used any projects before that did that have had that specification. But if it's just a simple HTML page being displayed within an XPA application, that's definitely possible. We have invoking of web services. We have we can add .NET compatibility to our XPA applications and .NET components to our applications. So yes, we can display web pages on our mobile XPA applications. But in terms of, I guess, a customized SharePoint, we'd have to take some digging. But HTML is supported in XPA.
Yeah, I've heard of it, customers being done, but I don't know that.
I personally haven't worked on any project like that yet. So.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's see if there's any more questions coming in. No, I don't see any others coming in. So thank you very much, Andy, and thanks to all of you for joining us. Excellent webinar today. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you again on another Magic Software webinar. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, guys.